All right, this is it. We're starting. So our Torah portion is Behar. Behar means at Mount Sinai. Behar Sinai, at the mountain of, and then the rest of it is Sinai. And what we have is the introduction of the Torah portion says that these instructions were communicated by God to Moses at Mount Sinai. And the bulk of the Torah reading is about the sabbatical year and the sabbatical year cycle, which leads to the Jubilee. So we have 6 years to work our land. And then on the 7th year, we let the land rest. It's a Shabbat. It's a Sabbath for God. It's a Sabbath for the land. And we are not supposed to work the land. And then we do this again and again. 7 times 7 is 49 years. And then the 50th year is sanctified as the Yovel, the Jubilee year. And then there's everything that applies to the sabbatical year, applies to the Jubilee year, and more. So for instance, besides the idea that the land has to be given a rest, and it shouldn't be worked, there's also the idea that debts are forgiven every 7 years. Tell that to the students in our country. And then at the Yovel, above and beyond all of that, is that all of the land deals that have been made over the previous 50 years are canceled. And remember that the Torah apportions a piece of land in the land of Israel to every family of every tribe. So the idea that the estate of a family may have gone through various Gilgulim, various states of ownership to somebody else, and then somebody else to somebody else. Whatever it is, everybody goes back home to their original family land. And anybody who has been working as an indentured servant is freed. So usually you had to work for 7 years. But here, even if you started working, 2 years before, whatever, Yovel comes in, you're freed, you're let go. That's what the Liberty Bell has. It has the verse from our Torah reading. Ukratem dror l'chol haaretz l'chol yoshvei aleh. Proclaim liberty throughout the land and to all the inhabitants thereof. So it's a complete emancipation of everybody. Everybody is free and everybody has a place to go. Right? Nobody is nobody is landless, nobody is homeless. Everybody gets a new start on life. And on equal footing with everybody else. So that's the vision of the sabbatical Shemitah, Shvi'it, the 7th year, or Shemitah, the year of letting go, and then the Yovel. But then the Torah says, because this is the system, it means that during those 50 years, when commercial transactions happen and people buy land and sell their land and so on, people should understand that when they buy, let's say, a piece of land, or when they're selling a piece of land, it's not in perpetuity. It's not a permanent sale, right? The sale of the land is actually a rental because the land is only going to be able to be transferred to the other person for the amount of years until the Yovel. So if it's, you could have maximum, I guess, 49 or 50 years, 49 years, whatever. And then, but you could also have just like 1 or 2 years. And then the land will revert to its original owner. And the seller may not be actually the original owner. The original owner could have sold the land 50 years ago. And then it got sold 20 years later to somebody else. And then 5 years later, it got sold to somebody else, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You could have like 25 different owners in between the original owner and where we are at the last moment. Whoever the owner is at the last moment has to know that they're only able, the right that they have to transfer the property is for a very limited amount of time. And the person who's buying the land has to understand that they're not buying the land for a lot of time. They're buying it for only very little time. And the Torah explicitly says, therefore, you can't cheat people and overcharge for the land. The price of the land should go down over time rather than up. You know, as far as we're concerned, the real estate market just keeps going up, 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 up. But according to the Torah system, the real estate market should start at a particular place and then go down, 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 down. As the like with a car. Once you buy the car, that's it. It starts going down. So that's the way this works for the land as well. And the Torah says, because God says, because you don't own the land. I'm giving the land for you to take care of, but I don't give it to you to be the absolute owner. I am the absolute owner. You are the custodians of the land. You're the caretakers of the land, but you don't have the ultimate ownership. So the ultimate ownership, as we always say, if I'm the owner, I can do whatever I want with it. I can ruin the land, I can sell the land, I can decide to not sell the land or yes, sell the land to whoever I want. And the Torah says here, no, you don't have those kinds of absolute ownership rights. You're only in charge of the land through my good graces, says God. Okay. Now, I also said that people that have to work off their debt become indentured servants. So, or they could sell off their land, right? So, let's say I fell on hard times, and I am the original owner. I'm from the family, the original owners of the land, and I have to in order to pay the debt that I incurred, instead of becoming a slave, I sell the land off, so I can use the money from selling the land to pay the debt. So, according to the system that I just described, you'll now have to wait up to 49 years before you're going to get your land back. But the Torah then puts in another provision. Since this was a sale that was basically under duress, if you really desire to get that land back, then it's possible to get it back. It's possible to redeem the land, right? That's the word geula. And the person who's the redeemer is a goel, right? God is goel Yisrael, the one who redeems Israel. And a redeemer is someone who's going to redeem the land. And that could be the person himself. Let's say he hits the lottery and now he's got money. He can force the hand of the person who bought the land from him and say, I want my land back and here's the payment. I mean, they have to pay a fair payment, but they can pay back. Not only that, but family members who also have an interest in keeping the land in the family holding, instead of waiting the 49 years or whatever, the 30 years, they can push. If they come up with the money, they can also redeem the land, right? And again, the Torah says the redemption price depends on how many years you have left until the Ovel, right? So it has to be a fair price. So this is some of the details that the Torah goes through. We need to know those details in order to appreciate what's going to happen in our Haftarah. Okay, so the prophetic portion that we're going to be looking at is from the prophet Jeremiah. And we find the reading on the Haftarah, on page 759. 759, it's chapter 32, in Jeremiah chapter 32, verse 6. And the Ashkenazim go a little further, and the Sfardim ended a little bit earlier. So
my grandpa's name is Mendel Ben Yaakov.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll dedicate it to him, what we
Thank
learned.
you. So that's the
Thank
idea.
you.
The idea is that his yahrzeit was this week, and therefore we're going to dedicate this learning to the Ilui Nishmat, to the raising up of the soul of Mendel Ben Yaakov. Thank you. Okay, so who's going to read now for us? So just another thing about Jeremiah. We've had Jeremiah before, but just a refresher. Jeremiah lives at the end of the 7th century BCE and the beginning of the 6th century BCE. So he lives through the destruction of the first temple. Right? He lives in the kingdom of Judah. He lives in the south. Right? The 10 lost tribes have been lost already. He's down south. He's actually he lives in the Benjamin section, but he is a priest himself, and he is, a person who gives the name Jeremiah to a harsh, browbeating kind of admonishing speech, a protest kind of speech, and a calling people out. So he was a fiery prophet who, mostly, basically just told everybody off. He was constantly telling truth to power. He was constantly complaining about corruption, whether in the high ups or in the people. And he, in 597 or something, he was in Babylonia, or he prophesied to the Jews in Babylonia who got exiled to Babylonia before the destruction of the temple. And he said, buy fields, buy homes in Babylonia, because guess what? You got time. This is going to be, a long haul, and you're going to have to get on with your lives. So he has this whole, and other prophets and other people were saying, false prophets, God is going to redeem us immediately. Nothing's going to happen to us. The Babylonians will be destroyed. Everything will be fine. And Jeremiah goes, no. Just, if you haven't gotten your act together, you don't deserve that God should turn history upside down. And the forces that are operating against you are stronger than you are. So make peace with that and settle down in Babylonia until such time as things change. That's his prophecy in 597. Now it's about 10 years later, and now he has a different prophecy. Now he has a prophecy about the Jews in the land of Israel. So 32:6. Who's going to read?
I'll read.
All right, Sarita, go. Thank you.
Jeremiah said, the word of the Lord came to me. Hanamel, the son of your uncle Shalom, will come to you and say, buy my land in Anatot, for you.
Anatot.
Anatot?
Yeah.
All right, Anatot, yeah. For you are next in succession to redeem it by purchase. And just as the Lord.
So let's stop just for a second and appreciate what we got here. This is his cousin, right? Son of your uncles, that's his cousin. His cousin is saying to him, I've got land holdings, and this is family holdings in Anatot. And we know that from other places, Jeremiah comes from Anatot. So that's the family home, right? That's the family, the village. That's where all the different people had, their fields. And apparently the cousin has had to sell off his land. And he doesn't have the wherewithal, he doesn't have the means to buy it back. But Jeremiah, he hopes, will be able to be his goel, will be able to be the redeemer. And he goes, look, you're my next of kin, so help me out here. Go ahead.
And just as the Lord had said, my cousin Hanamel came to me in the prison compound and said to me, please buy my land in Anatot in the territory of Benjamin, for the right of succession is yours, and you have the duty of redemption, buy it. Then I knew that it was indeed the word of the Lord.
Right, so it came true. God told Jeremiah, get ready, your cousin is on his way. And then the cousin actually comes and makes this request of Jeremiah. Okay, so this confirms this indeed was a true prophecy.
And Jeremiah is in prison?
Yeah, Jeremiah keeps on getting in trouble.
Right, yeah.
Because he's the person who's not, he's, like I said before, he's truth to power guy. And he refused to tell the king that everything was going to be okay. And that the king would be able to resist the Babylonians. So he's in trouble, and nevertheless, he's got hopefully the ability to help his cousin, and they haven't done sanctions on his bank account yet, so he'll be able to come through if he wants to. Now, does God say redeem the land? No, it's by implication. God simply says your cousin's going to come to, get ready. Your cousin's going to come to ask this favor of you, right? And then the cousin comes and says, "Come on, you're, if not you, who? You're the one in succession. You're the next one who can do this. So stand up for the family." And then we have verse 9.
So I have a question first. So Jeremiah, he goes around prophesying and what have you. What else does he do? How does he have money?
He's a priest.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
I mean, apparently,
so he gets a share. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, apparently this is clearly there is some land. The priests theoretically are not supposed to have land, but now so is his uncle a priest? I don't know. That would, I'd have to comb through the other, previous 31 chapters to figure this out. I don't know. I haven't seen discussion of it, but somehow or other, I mean, look, we know much later that the priests were upper class, that the priests were the aristocracy, that somehow they accumulated wealth because they were always given gifts. They were always, people wanted to be on their good side. They would get sometimes more than they really needed, and then they could benefit from it.
So I bought the land in Anatote from my cousin Hanamel. I weighed out the money to him, 17 shekels of silver. I wrote a deed, sealed it, and had it witnessed, and I weighed out the silver on a balance. I took the deed of purchase, the sealed text, and the open one according to rule and law, and gave the deed to Baruch, son of Neriah, son of Maaseiah, in the presence of my kinsman Hanamel, of the witnesses who were named in the deed, and all the Judeans who were sitting in the prison compound. In their presence, I charged Baruch as follows. Thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, take these documents, this deed of purchase, the sealed text and the open one, and put them in an earthen jar so that they may last a long time. For thus said the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, houses, fields, and vineyards shall again be purchased in this land.
So this is a whole long, legal procedure to make sure that the sale is done properly and is going to be recognized as legitimate through time. We have, the Talmud goes through some of the analysis of what these legal details have. You have two sets of contracts. One is sealed, one is open. So one is able to be checked by the public. The other one is the real deed that is stamped and closed, so it can't be tampered with, and that's supposed to be held on to by the people involved in the sale. But we're not going to go into all of those requirements. The point is, it's a legitimate sale, and everything is being done publicly. It's like making sure that everybody can witness that this is on the up and up. This counts. This is legitimate. And then that's what Jeremiah says. This is why I'm making it so clear to everyone. This is why I'm making it such a public thing, as opposed to just having it in the judicial, office. People didn't necessarily, buy and sell property with, out there. So in such a public way, he's doing this as a demonstration, right? This is a performance to convey to everybody why it's so important that this is happening. And this is because God says, right now, you're going to go into exile. Right now, things are terrible. But seal away this contract because you're going to survive. And then you're going to be able to come back and crack open the jar that has the deed in it to preserve it so it doesn't disintegrate. And then you'll be able to come back home. You'll be able to go back to that land, which is going to be legitimately yours. So that's the performance aspect of this message now of God's promise that even though Jeremiah is, like I said, really, really in trouble because Jeremiah is not sugarcoating what's happening right now. And he's saying, no, you're not going to defeat the Babylonians. The Babylonians are going to have their way with you. They're not going to be pushed aside. This is going to be bad times for us. But that doesn't mean that there will always be bad times. It doesn't mean that we will be wiped away off the face of the earth, or that our connection to the land of Israel will be completely severed. We're going to be able to come back here. So there's a kind of a mirror image. What he told the Jews in Babylonia: buy land, build houses. You're going to have to live someplace. You're not going to be able to live out of your backpacks for 70 years or whatever it's going to be. You have to sit down some roots. But on the other hand, now he's saying here in the land of Israel, but we're coming back. And therefore I can buy land now because I'm convinced that I or my descendants, and of course Jeremiah doesn't make it, my descendants will be able to come back, present the deed, and say, okay, we're moving back into our property, right? So this is a very legal act with a lot of details, but the bigger message is a message of hope and return, restoration. What's the connection to our Torah reading? Yeah, Jen.
Buying land, in both cases that might be temporary, but also having land that will eventually be restored to you. So it kind of works on both levels. He's in some means he's not going to live to see the rest of the use of this land, but it will be restored in theory to if there's a Mrs. Jeremiah and children, then they will be restored to his family eventually.
Or cousins and
Or cousin. I don't know how they entailed it. I do not know how
nieces.
they entailed the land back in Israel.
Well, this is his cousin telling him to buy the land, right?
Yeah.
So, right. So that's one thing. This is it's a little bit of a parallel. It's a little bit of taking that law that was in the Torah and actually putting it into practice, but the context gives it a different coloration, right? The context of redeeming the land, which in the Torah is like ho-hum, it's just part of this whole system that keeps on being cyclical again and again and again, every 7 years, every 50 years, et cetera, et cetera. Here, it's in a very, very specific moment. And this moment is a moment of crisis, right? This is a moment where Jeremiah himself is not denying how terrible things are. And it's therefore a moment where everybody would have thought, this is it. The story is over. It's finished. Who the heck knows what's going to happen next? But everything that we depended on as this kind of like regular rhythm of time will never be the same again. So when in the Torah it says that you'll be able to get back your land, whether in the Jubilee or by redeeming the land a little earlier, that individual detail of a big overriding system is now used as a national redemptive vision, right? Just like one person can get his land back, the whole people will be able to get their land back. That's Jeremiah's expansion of the message. That when we're in trouble and we're going to be losing our land, the whole Jewish people should remember not forever. It's not gonna be permanent.
So I'm puzzled though, because if he is buying the land now, then does he individually necessarily have it when the return comes, or does the person who he
it's
purchased
his
it from
estate.
have the right and the ability to take it
No,
back?
he's the redeemer. So that's the whole point. He's being approached by the cousin because he's the redeemer, meaning he's getting the family's land back.
Okay,
So now, but the point is, what do you mean we're getting the family land back? We're all going into exile. We'll never get our family land back. This isn't just
Okay.
about a commercial transaction. And that's what Jeremiah says. Yes, that kind of just like plain old regular prosaic kind of stuff of buying and selling, that's going to happen again. It's going to happen again. So I'm buying now, because I know in the future, this is going to be, a place to return to. This is my home, literally. Okay, good. So now we're at verse
16.
16. Yes.
But after I had given the deed to Baruch, son of Neriah, I prayed to the Lord. Ah, Lord God, you made heaven and earth with your great might and outstretched arm. Nothing is too wondrous for you. You show kindness to the 1000th generation, but visit the guilt of the fathers upon their children after them. O great and mighty God, whose name is Lord of hosts, wondrous in purpose and mighty in deed, whose eyes observe all the ways of men, so as to repay every man according to his ways and with the proper fruit of his deeds. You displayed signs and marvels in the land of Egypt with lasting effect, and won renown in Israel and among mankind to this very day. You freed your people Israel from the land of Egypt with signs and marvels, with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, and with great terror. You gave them this land that you had sworn to their fathers to give them, a land flowing with milk and honey, and they came and took possession of it. But they did not listen to you or follow your teaching. They did nothing of what you commanded them to do. Therefore, you have caused all this misfortune to befall them. Here are the siege mounds raised against the city to storm it.
Not Sigamans.
Yeah, I looked at that at first. I didn't know what it was. And then I said, oh, siege mounds.
Sigaman.
Yeah, I figured it. And the city, because of sword and famine and pestilence, is at the mercy of the Chaldeans who are attacking it. What you threatened has come to pass as you see. Yet you, Lord God, said to me, buy the land for money and call in witnesses when the city is at the mercy of the Chaldeans.
Okay, so let's stop here. Nice long speech, and very rich. It's got, of course, references here to biblical phrases that came before. So, and it's a very standard kind of. We've had this kind of telling the history of the Jewish people, right? Of taking us out of the land of Egypt, and so on. So there's all that. I want to start from the top of his speech. So 17 says, "Ah, Lord God." In the Hebrew, it's aha, aha. This is a very emotional exclamation. And so if you look at the note, the Hebrew word aha is used in connection with cries of amazement, concern, or despair. And it's found in a few more places in Yirmiyahu. So in Jeremiah, as I said before, Jeremiah was a very emotional guy. He wasn't just simply channeling whatever God said and said, here's the fine print. You will be destroyed. You are evil, and shame on you. Right? He gets into it. He acts things out. He does a lot of symbolic stuff. He turns this legal procedure into a performance theater. So now, though, he turns around and he's having a personal prayer to God. He's not prophesying to the public. He's turning to God one-on-one, right? And the first thing he blurts out is this uncontrollable sigh, groan, exclamation. So on the one hand, when he, when he puts out his prophecy to the public, he's all, absolute certainty and, telling it like it is, fearless and so on. But now what we have is we have the behind the scenes where he's sort of saying, God, I can't believe, are you serious? Is this really what you're telling me to do? He does it. He does exactly what God tells him to, what he understands God to say. He buys the land. He makes the whole thing a big public demonstration. But now when he turns to God privately, he says, you know what, this is very hard to believe. I'm so in despair of what's happening now. Are you sure that this makes any sense? So there's a very interesting, personal exposure of his own struggle, right? Of his own uncertainty. But he's, thrown right back at the God who keeps communicating with him. Yeah, Serena.
So when I was reading this, I was struck by how it's sort of going back and forth. I mean, it's of course praising God and reminding God about God's greatness and about how, he did free the Jews. He gave the land, but then also acknowledging, but we weren't so great to you back, but you did this great stuff for us, but we weren't so great. So it's like it's this back and forth, praising God and also reminding God that you did this for us, but also acknowledging, and I know that we didn't always, therefore, treat you so, so it's a really interesting back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think part of what he's saying, the way he brings both sides, is these are not symmetrical sides, because God is great and compassionate and mighty and does wondrous miracles and giving so much to us, and we don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
So the greater God is, the worse our betrayal is. If we can't get serious with how we should respond to God, then what do we really deserve? The greater God's goodness has been to us, the worse it is that we don't reciprocate. So he's acknowledging both sides, but both sides end up really making it terrible for us now, because as I said before, he's not, playing the game of denying the evils that the Jewish people have been guilty. He's not saying, it'll all be okay and everything will be fine. We're okay. We're not so bad. He's ready to teach, critical Jewish theory in the schools. He's being honest. He says, we have been miserable to you. So how the heck are you going to, so his question in the end is sort of, yes, you're great. You can do anything you want, but how are you going to forgive us at this time? How are you going to be able to turn the blind eye to how badly we have been? Right. So that's part of what his wondering is about.
But isn't it? It's more than that. Is that the faith that Jeremiah has to have here is that in spite of everything that we do or don't do, you will still be there for us.
Right.
And that at this point in time, things look really, really bad, but you're not going to abandon us.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the two sides of what he's engaged in. Publicly, he's proclaiming that very strongly. God will not abandon us. God is always going to be with us no matter what. But then privately, vis-a-vis God, he says, really? It's so hard to believe that you're going to actually not walk away from us. So he's the public persona is all absolute certainty, and the private persona is saying, whoa, God, this is so hard to bear. I want to look at one particular phrase, and I'm so thankful that the note actually brings this in, because it's one of the amazing stories in the Gemara, one of the amazing discussions. The speech at the beginning, as I said, has a lot of echoes of biblical phrases and formulations. And if you look at verse 18, so in the Hebrew goes, Oseh chesed la'alafim, u'mishalem avon avot el chek b'neihem achareihem. So this is a paraphrase of the 13 attributes of God's mercy and of the 10 commandments as well. And then the next part of that phrase, of that verse is Hakel Hagadol Hagibor Shem Tzvakot Shemo. Right. So then he addresses God. This is who you are. Right. So the verse 18. O great and mighty God, whose name is the Eternal of Hosts. Okay. So Hakel Hagadol Hagibor. So that should ring a little bit of a bell for us. That phrase should, sound a little familiar. So if we listen to the Amida, right, we go Hakel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora Kelel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei, right? So we have the phrase in the Amida is Hakel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora. We add the extra phrase and awesome, right? Maybe even terrifying. Right? That phrase, Hakel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, was, where did we get it from? That we put it in the Amida. We got it from God, from Moses. We got it from Moses. Moses praises God that way when Moses intercedes on behalf of the Jewish people. So we should understand that this time-hallowed phrase became a standard phrase for describing God. And in fact, the Talmud tells a story about one time of a person who, we talked about this a little bit in Talmud. The liturgy has a history of formation, right? The prayers that we have didn't just, come down from heaven all fixed the way what they are. It took time for people to formulate the prayers. So one time the Talmud says there was a shliach tzibur, somebody who was leading the prayers for the congregation, and before prayers were absolutely codified, there was much more leeway for people to offer their own improvised prayers. So this person started going, Hakel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora v'Hakadosh v'Hayom v'Chaviv v'Hanechmad, and he goes on and he starts going on for 10 minutes. He's praising God with everything, and then he finally pauses and he's ready to go on. And I think it's Ram Gamliel, I don't remember now, says to him, "Oh, really? Is that all? Is that's all you have to say about God? Just that praise? Doesn't God deserve even more praise than that?" And the Talmud says, that's our problem. If we start trying to praise God adequately, we'll never be able to do it. So how do we praise God at all? So one answer in the Psalms is L'cha dumiyat tehillah. The best praise for you is silence. That's the best praise. But then what the Talmud says, but that's not going to work. So what we do is we take what Moses said. If Moses could say it, then we can say it. So we can quote Moses' phrase. So therefore we say Hakel Hagadol Hagibor v'Hanora, because Moses says those three phrases are good. Okay, we're allowed to say it. Okay, so now let's look at the note, the comment on verse 18.
Okay. In his prayer, Jeremiah extols God with two attributes, great, Hagadol, and mighty, Hagibor. By contrast, Daniel praised God as great and awesome, Norah, not using the epithet mighty.
Okay, so that I didn't talk about, but there's another example of taking this stock phrase, but only quoting it selectively. Go ahead.
All three attributes are combined in a praise formula that praises the great, the mighty, and the awesome. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora.
Got it.
The sages pondered these.
That's Deuteronomy, that's Moses.
Right.
Okay.
The sages pondered these variations and tried to understand why the full formula enunciated by Moses in Deuteronomy was subsequently changed. They emerged with the understanding that Jeremiah and Daniel wished to ascribe to God only those attributes that they could honestly affirm on the basis of their personal experience. In the context of the suffering and the destruction that they had experienced, they found it impossible to ascribe all three of the attributes to God. Therefore, each of them omitted one of the attributes. The sages justify their liturgical revisions by stating that because God insists on truth, these pious ones would not ascribe false things to him. The full formula from Deuteronomy was restored to the liturgy by the men of the Great Assembly according to Talmudic tradition. It's now recited in the opening passage of the collection of blessings known as the Amidah.
Right. So what the Gemara says is, it says this really amazing and wonderful had discussion and explanation. What they said was that in the context of their situation, Jeremiah and Daniel, they each lived in a time. Jeremiah is living right with the Babylonians breathing down the necks of the Israelites and of the Jews, and they're going to destroy the temple. And Daniel, of course, lives after the destruction of the temple, when he's in exile in Babylonia as a captive. So the rabbis say, for Jeremiah, he says, where is God's terrifying, aspect when the Babylonians don't care about destroying God's own home? They're going to destroy. They're going to throw out the Jews. They're going to destroy the God's sacred space. So obviously they're not afraid of God. They have no reverence for God. So God is not Norah. God is not revered and tremendously awesome in human experience in this world today. So yes, God is a Gadol and a Gibor. God is very great, and God has done so many great things. But I wish that God was Norah. If God were a little more Norah, first of all, the Jewish people would be more loyal. And second, the enemies of God would be a little bit more restrained. So I think that God is simple. I can't say to God, oh, you're so revered, you're so awesome. It's not honest. So the rabbis then said that, and in the phrase, the translation here is a little bit, they have God insists on truth. The phrase in the Talmud is stronger. They knew of the Holy Blessed One, that the Holy Blessed One is all truth. That God is real, that God is true. What do we say at the end of the Shema? Hashem Elokeichem Emet. Right? Your eternal Almighty God is truth. Lefichach, because they knew that God was all truth. Lefichach lo kizvu bo. Therefore, they didn't play false with God. They didn't just like butter him up. They didn't say words that didn't really ring true, because God is truth. So on the one hand, it's not like they're walking away from God, but they're grappling with, where is God in the world that we live in? How can we describe God truthfully and embrace God's presence in a way that acknowledges some of the brokenness of this situation? The men of the Great Assembly come with the restoration of the Second Temple. So when they have a context and they're creating the prayers, They have, hey, we came back home. Look at that. God fulfilled all of God's promises. And in fact, who gave us permission to come back home? Cyrus, right? The emperor of the world, the Persian emperor. He said, whoa, if you want to serve God, then who am I to stand in your way? So they said all of these attributes are legitimate. All of these attributes can now be said with a whole heart because the situation is so much better than what it was in Jeremiah's time or in Daniel's time. So what the Talmud is saying, that context is everything. To be truthful to God, because they don't have the concept that maybe there is no God, or that how could I possibly believe in God with the world the way it is? That they can't imagine. But what they do imagine is saying, if I'm going to talk to God, I need to talk to God from a place of honesty. I need to be able to say, God, you're not really making a big impression out there in the world today. You're not really impressing people to follow your ways. Hold on, there's a question in the chat. Beryl, how does Jubilee affect Abraham's purchase of the burial place in Machpelah from a Hittite? The answer is not at all. There is no effect because Jubilee comes afterwards. Abraham's purchase of the land is part of a symbolic step toward the Jewish people becoming identified with the land. And then the Jubilee and Shemitah sabbatical things are all predicated on accepting the idea that we are the custodians of this land. We're not the custodians of Montclair. We're not the custodians of Ukraine. We are custodians of the land of Israel, and we have to treat it right. And it's permanently our responsibility to take care of this land. Jen.
Okay, fun fact, if I'm looking up dates correctly. So wait, Jeremiah, I don't know if we said this, but Jeremiah would have been around when Deuteronomy was discovered in the temple.
So according to biblical critics, Josiah is the king who does the Deuteronomic revolution, and Josiah is at the beginning of Jeremiah's career. Yes.
Yeah, so he was like, so it would be interesting
Like
to know. I know
20, something like that.
we won't ever know like exactly what influenced what, but that's very interesting that he would have been there and was a priest and active already when Deuteronomy comes to light.
Right.
Yeah, so
He's one of the guys that's on board with that.
yeah.
Yeah. Good. All right. So we have 1 more minute. So let's get God's answer to Jeremiah's krechts.
Then the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah. Behold, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. Is anything too wondrous for me?
Right. That's it. Guess what? Even my compassion is a miracle. Even my loyalty to the Jewish people, despite how undeserving they are, that's something that I'm capable of doing, and you'll never understand it. Right? Hayipalei kol davar. Right? This hamimeni palei kol davar. Nothing is too mysterious. Nothing is too unknown for me, wondrous for me. I can do these things because I'm God. That's right. So in the end, that's also a kind of a reassurance back to Jeremiah saying, I can only say certain things about you because that's the only things I can really truthfully affirm about you. And God says, whatever you're going to truthfully affirm about me, guess what? There's a heck of a lot more that you may not be able to grasp, to apprehend. There's nothing that I can't, get involved in, accomplish, do. If I'm not doing it, then that's on me right now. But it's not, it's not for us to understand that. Right? I can do whatever I want, and if I'm going to restore the Jewish people to the land of Israel, nobody's going to stop me, right? Including the Jewish people. Right? So this is God's answer. All right. So that's it for today. Looking forward to next week is the last Torah portion of the book of Vayikra. And it really follows on this one. Many years we have them read together, Behar and Bechukotai. So we'll see what happens next time. Okay, Kol Tuv, everybody. Happy conclusion of Lag BaOmer.
Thank
You
you.
too, Rabbi.
Bye.
Bye.